everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from across the country. We'd like to welcome you and thank you for attending tonight. Tonight's session will take an in-depth look at some of the barriers for female participants in officiating in Canada. I'd like to welcome Christa, Anna, Marla, and Frankie, my co-host. Before we get started, however, we'd like to do a recognition of traditional lands. And we wanted to start by acknowledging that not everyone is on the same territorial land. As such, at Canada Basketball, we respect and acknowledge the First Nation, Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis peoples of Canada as the keepers of the territory upon which we'll be learning today. Thank you. So, as I said, I am honored and excited to be sharing tonight's hosting responsibilities with Frankie Billingsley. I'd like to read you a little bit of a brief history about Frankie and talk her up as the rock star she is. Basketball was the first organized sport Frankie ever played. Her passion for the sport landed her a scholarship to play at the Alberta college level. After playing, she coached at both the high school and college levels. Eventually, Frankie picked up a whistle and she never looked back. She has been reffing at the university level for 15 years and has attended 4 U Sport Women's National Championships. In addition to reffing, Frankie also umpires softball. Now, this is where I need to talk Frankie up. Not only is she a rock star at the basketball level, but she rocks it at the softball level. So much so that she has been chosen to represent Canada as a softball umpire at the upcoming Tokyo 2021 Summer Olympics. Congratulations, Frankie.
Thank you so much, Georgia. Thank you for those kind words. And it's an honor to be co-hosting with you this evening. So for all of you out there, please let me share a few things about Georgia Risnita with you. Georgia played basketball at the university level, where she earned Rookie of the Year and All-Canadian. Shortly after playing, she went to the National Coaching Institute in Victoria, transitioned into being head coach at the university level, as well as being part of the Canada Basketball Centre for Performance. She started officiating in 2007, having officiated at 4 national championships, and she's currently teaching for Canada Basketball and a provincial supervisor of officials in Ontario. So, George, I'm so excited to be doing this co-hosting with you tonight. And I can't wait to hear from our panelists, Anna, Marla, and Christa. As Georgia said, we're talking about breaking barriers and building new paths for female officials tonight. And I see this unfolding in 4 different components. We're going to talk about the barriers that each of these ladies are going to talk about. We're going to then turn our attention to how they've coped with those barriers. We're going to spend some time talking about some solutions that we think we could put forward to address these barriers. And hopefully at the end, we'll have time to address some of the questions from the audience. So feel free to populate the Q&A that you'll find at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to address them as we go. So I'll like to turn my attention to Anna. If you could talk a little bit about your background in the sport and just introduce yourself so that the audience can learn about you.
Hey, thanks, Frankie. Thanks, Georgia. Thanks to Canada Basketball for including me in this discussion and also for including officiating as part of this month-long discussion. I think it's great that we get our own week. I think it's definitely progress already. So a little bit about me and how I got to where I am. I guess I would start with just from the time I was a little kid, basketball was always my sport. Like I grew up in Northern Ontario in a neighborhood full of guys. Like there was not a single girl my age anywhere in my neighborhood. So, I mean, because of that, I think I grew up as a bit of a tomboy, but like I spent my entire childhood just playing basketball, street ball, shooting hoops in people's driveways. Like that was my childhood. Loved playing the game, loved playing competitively. But I have a slightly different path than I think a lot of other officials in that, like when I got into school, particularly undergrad, and then I went on to do a graduate degree, I kind of decided that, you know, I should put basketball aside, especially like playing competitively, and I should just focus on my school, focus on my, you know, developing a career, building a career up for myself. And so I kind of put it aside and stepped away from the game. I still played in women's leagues, like still watched the sport religiously, but I really tried to focus on other things for, I would say, several years. I did a little bit of coaching at the high school level, and then just kind of by fluke, one of the females who was playing in one of my women's leagues, you know, started tapping me on the shoulder and saying, like, I really think, especially because I was always complaining about illegal screens, she's like, I really think you might be good at officiating. Have you ever thought about it? And of course I told her, like, absolutely not, because, you know, growing up, I had never seen a female referee, right? So I hadn't even contemplated it. But, you know, over the course of, I would say, like a year or two at least, she kept persisting. And like almost every week she would say, hey, we have a meeting next week. Will you come out and try this thing? And, you know, after, you know, establishing myself in my job, I really definitely noticed that something was missing. Like I really missed the game. And so I finally one day ran into her again on the street, and she just literally like dragged me to a board meeting where I was forced to write an exam, my very first meeting, which I failed. And then they threw me on a basketball court like the next weekend with no training. I was just told if the ball goes that way, you go that way. And I was like really terrible at it. And that's kind of where it started, right? Because officiating is just such a challenge. Like you're never going to start out being good at it. You always have to work and work to get better. So like I loved that challenge right from the start. And so I just kind of threw myself into it. And since then, like I very quickly got hired to the OUA panel here in Ontario, did a lot of like high school tournaments, did several national youth sport tournaments. I got my FIBA card in 2012. At the same time, I was doing some other things in the game. Like I started working the table, like for the table crew at the Raptors 905 games. So I started to see the game kind of from that more, you know, sideline administrative perspective, which I thought was great. Did a lot of, you know, coaching of other officials and helping out at camps and that kind of thing. And I'm still going at the youth sport level. And I guess the next phase in my career now is I just finished the several weeks of training to become a FIBA commissioner. So I passed all my exams. I guess I'm officially now a FIBA commissioner. So that's going to be the next phase in my officiating career. And that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's so interesting to actually take a moment to hear how people's journeys have evolved. So thank you so much for sharing that. Marla, how about you taking a few minutes to share how you have evolved in your officiating journey, what brought you here, and what you're currently involved in?
Sure. Thank you. I'd like to echo first, I guess, Anna's comments too, thanking Canada Basketball. It's just been wonderful to see this whole month of March and focused on females in the sport, and really great that that we're focusing on athletes, coaches, and referees as well. So really appreciate that and all the hard work that they've put into it. And I'm very pleased and proud to be here with all of my fellow peers. So nice to see you. I'm the Westerner in the group for the audience, and so living in Alberta, where I think everyone else there in the panel's on the east side. But I started actually playing sports and specifically basketball, but pretty much all sports when I was, from the time I can remember, which is about 8 years old. I think I came out of the womb competitive. I grew up in a family of 10. So I had to fight for everything, and roughhousing and playing sports was just sort of natural for me from day one. You know, as I got into school and right into grade school, I just loved spending time in the gym and hanging out and around the phys ed department. You know, those were my favorite teachers. I helped out with intramurals and tournaments, and I played on almost every sports team. So I was pretty much like Anna. I was a little bit of a jock, a little bit of a tomboy, and you know, I just loved any activity that was going on. And I think my teachers really recognized that they couldn't get me out of the gym, so anytime I was there, they put me to work. even from making signs to, to organizing tournaments as well as playing in them. And so they started suggesting to me when I was in junior high, actually, to start refereeing. And I would referee, like intramurals and the other teams, the boys teams and whatnot, and in tournaments when I wasn't playing. And I think I always had a really good knack for the rules. Wouldn't say I'm a control freak. I really liked studying up, and I knew the rules, and I felt always very confident in just sharing that and being on the floor. So yeah, I was blowing a whistle from a very young age. And I loved understanding the plays, and I love practicing. So all of that, just hanging out with others in the gym, was a big part of my start. So I really would say that for us as an official institution across the country, we probably should be tapping into some of our very earlier tapping in with our junior high phys ed teachers and try and find people that are already starting to take part in it, because the earlier you learn, I think the more you just stay involved. So when I went into high school, the junior high teachers were always getting me to come back and referee, and then they would pay me. So that's when I started actually making a little money at it, which kind of nice. And then I went on, I played high school basketball, and I also played high school field hockey, which was another big sport for me. And when I graduated, I considered playing basketball, but I did have a love for field hockey. And so I went on to play university field hockey. And I still did a lot of junior high refereeing, but I also was coaching my field hockey team back at my high school at that time too, and started to fall in love with coaching. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to go into coaching. But unfortunately, when I graduated, my career was a career that just really didn't allow for the time to be a coach at 3:15 or 3:30 in the afternoon. So I was actually very active in umpiring field hockey, and I was umpiring at the university level, as well as doing some international exhibition tournaments. And a friend of mine who played on my local team for field hockey, who also was a university player, a university basketball player, as well as a university and college referee, had said, "Hey, you're not a bad umpire. And I know you've been refereeing basketball at the junior level. Why don't you start thinking about refereeing basketball a little bit more seriously?" And she would try to get me to come out, and I couldn't really fit it into my schedule. But then she kept pushing on me. And one of the big turns was the fact that umpiring, sometimes field hockey is outside and it's really, really cold. And coming inside to the gym was just a really nice opportunity. So I did. I went to that first rookie clinic, and I started just doing community ball and working up through the ranks. And then I didn't really know when I started where basketball refereeing could take you. And so I was very excited, when I started actually getting some training, because everything up until now had sort of just been me winging it. And when I got that training, it was, I felt like, wow, this is really fun. And this is really, really good. And I had a lot of friends still in basketball as well, and in the community. And so I really had, I had trouble at that time as well, continuing umpiring field hockey, because one, it's a summer sport, and most of the competition, obviously it's less well played or less popular, I suppose. And so a lot of that required travel. And I was growing my career. I was developing my family. I had 2 young kids at the time, and they were getting active in sports. And so I really had to make a choice. So around 2001, I made a choice to just focus entirely on refereeing and refereeing basketball, and really trying to see how far I could go and push myself further. So after that, I also took the level 1. I'm a level 1 coach in basketball, and I coached my son for 7 years. And so that was really exciting. And I've also sat on the ABOA, which is our local board. And I'm currently the director of officiating. And years back, I also was on the board as the secretary. So I think really for me, the biggest part was just And for a lot of people that stay involved in sports, it's just staying involved. It's staying involved in being active and staying involved in a sport that you love. I love all sports, but I've really found a family in basketball. I've got a great network. We're great people, and lots of opportunities to socialize. The other thing that I've found that I'll maybe just finish with is that participation in refereeing, coaching too, has really, really helped my professional life, and my professional life has really helped my refereeing. So there's a strong connection between sports and just our character, our development, who we are, how we grow, teamwork, dealing with conflict. We have plenty of that with refereeing. I don't have as much of that in my work life. Leadership, resiliency. That's a really big thing right now that, we're talking about in the workplace, especially resiliency and in everything we've been facing in this last year. Maturity and emotional intelligence, all of those things that, we need in just our lives, not even just our professional life, but also is very, very valuable to develop as a person, and has helped me as a referee. So, and I just love it, and it makes me happy.
Thank you, Marla. And what a great, wonderful story. I want to be with you in a survival situation now that I know that you're one of 10. Christa, wonder if you can unmute and tell us about your journey into becoming a professional basketball coach.
Hi, everyone. Christa Eniojukan here. I grew up in Guelph, Ontario. Like many others on the panel, grew up playing lots of sports. I ended up attending Wilfrid Laurier University and playing basketball there for 3 years. My 4th year, I sat out. And then I went to Teachers College at York University and played for 2 more years. After graduating, I stayed in Toronto and started teaching right away. And that's when I started really diving into coaching. Started at the elementary level during my middle school time. And it was great because you could just experiment. They were fun. There were kids you taught at school. I did boys, I did girls, I did after school programs. It was great learning. And at the same time that year, I also joined the CP program, and Georgia was in that. So learned a lot through those programs. And then I quickly had an itch for coaching and just started getting involved in everything and anything I could. Rep programs, regional programs, and then eventually got the opportunity to coach provincially. And so I coached provincial team 3 years as an assistant and then 4 years as a head coach. It kind of like overlapped. I also did a prep team, started that from scratch called Durham Elite in the more newly found OSBA program. So I was doing both teaching and coaching all along, a really hectic, busy schedule, but the more and more I did it, the more fire I wanted to do, and I aspired to coach full time. So in 2018, September 2018, I started at Ontario Tech University as head coach of that program, and last year was our inaugural season. And so alongside that, last year I was asked, late last year I was asked by CBOC to be the U Sport Commissioner. And now I am a friend of the officials. So working along them instead of against them.
Thank you so much, Christa. What a great, my partner was one of the coaches for the Canadian men's national basketball team. And when he first started learning about officiating, he said to our son, Emmett, the dark side is coming over tonight. When all the officials were coming over to review game tape. And so, but one thing he really didn't realize is the amount of work that it takes to be really good at this craft. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. I just want to pick out a couple of things. When we talk about breaking barriers, I think one thing that hasn't really come up in it, and it probably won't come up in the conversation, so I'd just like to highlight it tonight. And this is something that crosses all sports, is all 3 of you talked about, and George and I also, all 5 of us got into our roles, but it all started out of playing. And if you don't have a mass group of people playing, it's hard to fill coaching and officials roles. And something that Sport Canada needs to look at is that sport is still a socioeconomic status divide, right? So, and this is really close. I don't talk about this very often, but I grew up in Alberta, and sports are free from kindergarten to grade 9 in the school system. But once you get into high school, they cost money. And I'll never forget like trying out for the high school team, and I made the team, and I got a letter saying, you know, you made the team and this is what it costs. I didn't even show it to my parents. I just took it home and brought it back the next day and said, sorry, I can't play because I can't afford this. And just that hour of, no, we'll cover it. Think about all of the things that have happened in my life if it wasn't for that fee being waived. So that's something that I think Sport Canada needs to look at, because this is not basketball specific, but it is a huge barrier for people to participate. So the other thing I just wanted to point out that was a theme in all of your introductions is that the Canadian Association of Women in Sport did a survey of all the women that are participating in sport. And there are over 70% of women participating in their current role. And how do you think that they got to that role? Someone asked them if they would do it. So I just want to point that out, that for whatever reason, women are more inclined to take that next step or to take on a new role if they are asked one-on-one by someone that they have a relationship with or a connection with to do it. So I just thought that was so interesting, because I know that's my story, that's Anna's, that came out in Marla's, George's nodding, Christa, like, so just, yeah, so I think that's really important for us to realize that if we're trying to break down a barrier of the number of people that are participating in different roles, one of the ways we can do that is to recognize and acknowledge that there's actually data to substantiate that women will be more likely to participate in different roles if they're actually asked individually by someone that they trust. Okay, so enough about that stuff. We're getting to the actual agenda now, which is I'm really excited that we're going to be talking about barriers to journeys and things that you've experienced. So I'm gonna start with you, Anne, and I'd like you to talk to us about your experiences, starting with some of the challenges that you may have faced, barriers that you feel that have been placed in front of you that have maybe impeded your success in officiating or elongated experiencing success. And if you could try to highlight barriers that may not have been experienced by male officials.
Okay. Well, I agree with everything you just said. And I think like the needing to be asked, like in my case, I needed to be asked like at least 30 times over the course of a year or two before I finally said, okay. But that's like, I would say I've been thinking about this question. There are kind of two major barriers or challenges, like one that I experienced myself coming up through the ranks and one that I just see all the time. And that I would say the first one, which is what I see all the time, and it's related to what you just said, is related to what Christa said, is like, I just think we kind of have a massive image problem when it comes to officiating. I think especially compared to coaching, which I think when you're a player coming up, I think coaching, you know, compared to officiating just seems way more glamorous. Like you're immediately part of a team. You get to impart all of this knowledge that you've come up with and learned. You know, you get to still be competitive, go to tournaments, like all the things that you loved about being a player, you can hopefully apply as being a coach, versus like being an official. And Frankie, you referred to it as like coming over to the dark side. Like who, especially if you're thinking about young female players, like who really wants to like put on this head to toe polyester uniform and run up and down the court and just have everyone yell at you, and basically half of the gym hates you all the time. So like I think that's kind of the perception that we have been dealing with for a while, and it's the perception that I definitely had as a player. Hopefully with some positive role models, and you know, even what we see at the NBA level right now, like the fact that girls can see women doing this at like a really high level, being very successful. Hopefully that image problem can change a little bit, but like there is still that like crushing kind of barrier to recruiting young females, where coaching is just kind of the biggest draw and officiating hasn't really been considered an option. And again, I have to give kudos to Canada Basketball for like making officiating a whole week of this month of women in basketball, because I think historically it probably wouldn't have happened. Like when I first started, we were never really part of these discussions, or at least not that I'm aware of. So it's awesome that we're now seen as like this is a viable and attractive opportunity for females who want to stay involved in the game. But kind of below this image problem that we have is like some harsh realities that I think have to do with like you know, that just this massive old boys club that exists. Like it's officiating is clearly like a male dominated vocation. And I think especially for young females considering like, you know, different ways to stay involved in the game. Like, again, who wants to, you know, as a young female, become a referee, and like the coaches are all male and they're, you know, most of them are probably like the age of your father. Like who wants to be yelled at by an older male, like, you know, on your evenings and weekends? Like it's not fun, but like there's a pretty serious, like a power imbalance, like just the number of, like the small number of females that are still doing this. Like I kind of joke saying it's an image problem, but like there are some real challenges like kind of below the surface there. And so a lot of that also has to do with like the age that we try to recruit young females into officiating. And hopefully we'll talk about age at some point tonight again. But so my first major barrier, I'd say this image problem that exists, and like just how like the difficulties that we have in recruiting people. Like I see it all the time. I see so many young females start and then leave because of this. So the second major challenge or barrier is one that I definitely experienced coming up. And that is like, once we do manage to recruit some females at any age, like how we kind of develop and train and educate them. Like I think we have we have different development pathways for male officials and for female officials. And I mean, I experienced this very early in my career where it's a great thing, but that Ontario Basketball and OABO held like an all-female development camp, like very early in my career. But I was forced to make a choice. Like, do I go to this all-female camp, which of course I wanted to, or do I stick with my male cohort, like that I had started with, and go to the camp that they're going to, because they're going to be learning 3-person officiating. I don't want to be left behind because I have to go to the female camp. So basically, I just had to do both. And I think a lot of the time as I was coming up, I would just kind of have to do twice as much work basically to stay in line and to develop alongside some of my male like colleagues. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that like we kind of have a legacy issue with how we look at men's basketball and women's basketball, especially when we're talking about officiating and assigning officials. Like in Ontario, we have historically had the men's panel and the women's panel at the highest level. And so females work their way up on the female side. If you're very successful and do very well, then, you know, several years into your career, maybe you will get a men's assignment, whereas male officials starting on the panel, like within their first year, will be assigned to men's games. So there's definitely a difference in how we like treat and assign officials to games. So like, I don't know a single female official who doesn't see this happen all the time and get frustrated by it. I get text messages and phone calls from other female officials all the time about this. Yeah, so I think, I mean, maybe we can solve this problem in tonight's discussion, but probably not. Like, this is a fairly large issue, but like we do, I think, need to rethink how we do assignments, how we train, how we develop our officials. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Anna. I'm not going to claim to that we're going to solve anything tonight, but I think you can't really dig into an issue until you start talking about it. So I really appreciate your, I just want to call out the fact that this isn't really like a super comfortable conversation. And I really appreciate people being, trying to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's kind of what we're doing tonight. And so I appreciate you trying to do that, because when we're talking about things that haven't been comfortable, it's not easy. And the two barriers that you've addressed are the first one, the image problem, is certainly not sports specific. I mean, I teach softball clinics and basketball clinics, and first year classes are, if you ask them, what are they concerned about? It's being yelled at, right? So that is an issue. And then the pathways is also something I've seen in softball. Women progress through the women's side, men progress through the men's side. But I'm curious to see if Marla has anything to add or change, or any other barriers that she's experienced.
Yeah, thanks, Frankie, and great conversation there with you, Anna. That you have everything that I would have said, so I don't want to repeat anything, because I agree with Anna 100%. What I might add is the point where you say we get past that perception, we recruit a female. It's not just the males maybe being assigned, or the training or whatnot. It's actually our partners in a lot of cases, and coaches, and how they perceive. So the female got past the perception of being a referee, and now walks into that perception that everyone else has of a female referee. And oftentimes that perception is they're not as competent, they're inferior. If they work a men's game, why are they not getting a male referee? So that is a stereotype that is out there. And I agree with you, Frankie, it's very difficult and sometimes uncomfortable to talk about. It's not everyone. I have tremendous male referees and mentors that are mentors, that are friends, that are very supportive. But we do have this issue where female referees, oftentimes when they walk into the gym, especially if it's a male coach or it is a male team, they're seen as, why did I get her on my game tonight? And especially when I was first starting out, I would walk in and a partner would see me, and you could read it in their face that back in the day, I think I said, when you don't have arbiter and you couldn't see who your partners were, sometimes it was a shock, and that's a very difficult thing for an up and coming female official to get past, to feel confident, to feel the support of their partner, and not feel like they're being thrown under the bus all the time. Or protected. I was put on one game once in my career where I had worked a women's game first, and I was a college men's official at the time, and one of the crew got sick, and so I did a double header. And my partner said to me, didn't know him very well, but said to me, "Don't worry, I'll go and explain the situation to the coach for you, and let him know we're going to look after you." So that's happening amongst our crews. That's happening, with the coaches. And unfortunate, I hate to say that, it's more the male coaches or the male teams, players. The other thing I would add is just echoing a little bit of Anna's point too, around necessarily having two streams, but that male officials will get a male game, a men's game, very, very early in their career. And so what happens with that is, I'm not saying that they're not qualified, but what's happening is that they're going to get those experiences twice as fast. We talk about having to work harder. We have to work harder because we're not getting the same level of experiences, and we're not getting them early enough in our career. We're having to prove ourselves for years on end, and then you might get a men's game. There is something to be said about crisis stimulation. And that's why firefighters do it. That's why policemen do it. That's why lots of careers do it. We practice being, under the gun. We practice and want those more challenging situations to allow us to be better in the comfortable situations. And so by not being able to get tested, to be able to expand our skills and our competency, then we're stagnating. We're staying at a lower, slower pace than young male officials. And it's hard enough to recruit young female officials. But if you're not allowing them those opportunities to grow and to be tested in those situations, it's just, you're not going to see as many opportunities for them to then continue their career and to advance their career to the highest level that's possible for them. And you're not going to see as many role models because women are quitting. Because they're not sticking it out through that period of time when they just feel like it's pushing up against a brick wall in some respects. So I see improvement. So I don't want this to sound like it's not improving, that these opportunities aren't starting to be developed for women, but we have to work hard to continue to make those possibilities happen, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Marla. I think it's important that we do talk about that. I think, my goal as an official was to be the best on the women's game that I can, but I want the ability to referee both. And I think that is the biggest thing is that we want the best officials for the best game. And it doesn't matter what game you're doing. It doesn't matter what gender you're doing. You should be the best official on that game and to strive for that. So I think that's something that, moving forward, that we need to make realize that if you're on the women's game or the men's game, you're a referee in the game of basketball and you need to do it to the best of your ability. Christa, you have a plethora of experience in terms of playing, coaching, and everything. I've got to ask you this. Have you been surprised by the lack of female officials in the OUA?
Yes and no, just because I've been around for so long, right? And seen it at all levels. And, there's a problem at every level. So I would be surprised if all of a sudden I got to the OUA level and all of a sudden there were all these women. Like, that's not reality, right? We know that it starts at the grassroots, like you guys are saying, and the opportunity isn't there. And you don't see it like elementary schools, grade 7 and 8. I would barely see a female referee, right? So yes, not fully surprised.
Have you been surprised in terms of the attitudes towards the assignments at the OUA level now that you're at the university level?
It's interesting to learn and understand more as I go that, some males aren't too happy about refereeing females, that some women's games aren't getting the best referees, and just, I guess, the whole perception of the women's game, let's say, and even just the way that sometimes people can be treated. So you guys feel it as a female ref, I feel it as a female coach, right? Just in the way of how I get treated versus my counterpart who's a male, right? So the gender bias is there. I think a lot of it is subconscious, and a lot of training needs to happen to get rid of it, right? And a lot more conversations like this. There's some amazing males that are amazing allies to us, but there's a lot of old school thinking, let's say, that needs to be eliminated.
As a follow-up, do you see a commonality between the barriers that you faced in coaching and that the officials face, particularly in the diversity piece?
Yeah. So absolutely, Marla and Anna, with the gender, the representation is a big thing for me. So first I'll preface with my entire playing career from elementary school through university was all white men, and some amazing individuals, mind you. Some of them are still my mentors today, but I never had one female coach. I had assistants, but never a head, right? Never had coach, and I never had a person of color. So growing up, and I'll tell you a quick story. When I was at Laurier, Stu Julius said to me, I was a pretty passionate, outspoken leader on our team, let's say. And he said to me, I think you should do your master's in coaching. when I thought about what I was going to do after. And I was back and forth between doing master's and teachers college and so forth. And I looked him in his face and I said, I'll never coach. And I have no idea why I said that, but it's probably because I didn't ever see anybody like me doing it. So why would I do that? Right? I saw a lot more people teaching. My father taught, I'll go and teach, right? But when you have that passion and it's in you, it didn't go away, right? So I found different ways to do it eventually once I got into teaching. But the representation is huge, and it's more, I think, than people even fully understand, right? Like the imposter syndrome is real. So even for myself, and when you guys talk about, when Frankie said everyone's saying they had to be asked, for me, I took a leave of teaching and I wasn't teaching, and I got asked by the AD to put in my to apply for the position that I'm at Ontario Tech, and I at first was contemplating it. And it took my best friend and my husband to be like, you know, this is your dream job. Like, what have you been doing all this time? Like, you live, breathe basketball. Like, what are you waiting for? Right. But I didn't know that, like, I didn't see myself, or if I did, it wasn't now. Like, it was like, oh, I still have this much to learn. I'm not ready. And they're like, what else would you do to gain that position? You've coached all at the next, like, that's the next step. And so I had to be, you know, pushed and nudged, just like you had to be, Anna, just how you had to be, Marla. I had to be encouraged to do that. So that's the number one barrier, I would say, personally for myself. The second one I just wanted to quickly highlight is opportunity. And I see that on both sides, especially because I was an inner city middle school teacher for 15 years, right? There's a lot of people like Frankie's story who can't afford to do sport. And when we say things like, oh, it's just $50. And it's like, no, like that's the difference between paying for groceries and not. And so opening it up and giving those young people opportunities, because really all that's happening is we're losing out. We're losing out on the opportunity to have really gifted, talented individuals grow our sport. And that's both on coaching and refereeing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you for the three of you. Just you hit on some major ones that George and I were hoping you would. I also want to just raise that there might also be a perceived barrier if coach or official, if you become a mother. You know, like there's a perception that all of a sudden you can't maybe commit, or you don't want to be around that much. So, and I don't see when our counterparts are becoming fathers that same perception, right? So that's just an interesting you know, and I still think that the media attention on the men's games as opposed to women's games does lead to a certain perception of the value of the sports. In softball, the women's team is the only team representing Canada at the Olympics. The male side is baseball. So the women's program gets a lot of attention, but that, so the attitude that you talk about, Christa, of the officials on the court really stands out to me, because in softball, the women's game gets a lot of respect because it's in the Olympics and the men's team isn't. But in basketball, I mean, I don't know if you could call it systemic or not, because I don't know where it comes from. But when a high school official shows up for a girls' final in a big tournament game, and he's not there on time to have a pregame, and his partners are really excited, and they say, dude, what was going on? He goes, it's girls' game. What the hell? That's like, where does that come from? Where does that come from? You know, or someone I was mentoring who had just moved up another level calls me in tears because she just finished her first game at the next level, and she didn't get the opportunity to have a proper pregame because her partner was like, I got this, like, you know, you're good. We don't need to spend time on a pregame. I've been around forever. It's like, no. She's new. She's excited. She's nervous. She needs to go through the process. Like, so I just, so you really picked out some of the, and that whole developmental path, Anna, that you talked about. You know, I just like, it's okay for all of us, because each of us have been there. It's okay for us to be the crew chief in a women's game, to onboard a new official. And then 2 weeks later, that new official is reffing their first men's game, right? And we're in our third, fourth, fifth, sixth year of being on whatever group of people that we are, whether it's college or university. And it's no matter how self-confident you are as a person, to whom I think I am, it is really kind of can be a little bit psychologically crushing to not understand those differences. And Marla, I would kind of disagree a little bit that it's the coaches and players that start that, because I was very new to umpiring. There's a national convention every 3 years, 400 umpires in a room, very few women. And the panelists at the front were coaches of national teams. And I used every fiber of my being to get up the courage to ask the question, do you care about the gender of the official that walks onto the diamond? I had to ask this question in front of 400 people who didn't know who I was, because I was like a 4th-year official. And this 6'5" coach who was known throughout the land stood up, walked towards me. He was about 20 feet away. I swear to God, my heart was racing so much. And I don't give a shit who comes onto the diamond. I just want them to call balls and strikes. And I was like, I think I had a tear, because I knew what I was facing in that sport, because it was way more male dominated than basketball. And so I don't know if the players and coaches really care as much as they used to. They just want someone who can call the game. So anyway, the next part of our conversation is about coping. So if you could just take, because I don't want to take away from the most important part of the conversation, which is solutioning, for us to be creative about that. So if you could take a minute or two, each of you, to sort of talk about how did you cope with these barriers that you've identified. And I think, Christa, I'll start with you.
So I think we've all touched on, or maybe it was just me, it was just about like the imposter thing, but really, like, you have to do a lot of self-care to feel strong within the roles that we're in, right? And so that's super important. And sometimes I think that gets missed. So I wanted to start with that, because, you know, even if we may not feel confident inside, we have to appear it on the outside. And so we have to tell ourselves that we're capable and we can do hard things, and all of those, you know, positive affirmations to get ourselves through. I think creating networks and allies are super important. You know, people that give you opportunities. And, you know, Frankie, you mentioned the mother situation and parenting. Like, my first assistant job was with Jody, and my children were so young. Like, I think 2 and 1 or 3 and 1 or something crazy, where they were in the gym and I was like breastfeeding at times and whatever, but she gave me that opportunity, right? And if it wasn't for Jody giving me that opportunity, who knows if I would have went through that high performance of coaching, right? So having those people around you that are going to support you and lift you up, and holding on to them. And the one thing I will say is then eliminating those other ones that aren't. And so for me, I was able to decide which coaching positions am I going to continue with and which ones am I not going to, because I don't feel as comfortable or as supported. And I think that's super important as you move along the pathway.
Thank you, Christa. Marla, can you add or build on Christa's coping strategies?
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, a lot of it has been around, you know, not to let those situations where I have encountered them to hold me back. You know, I agree with Frankie. I wasn't trying to say that it was, you know, all athletes or coaches, but when I started, it was certainly there, not something that was as familiar, because we didn't have a lot of female officials at the time. And so those things, when you encountered them, it was hard to go and talk to someone about it, and to talk about those feelings of, you know, as I said, I'm inferior just because I'm female walking into a gym. How do I get past that? And I agree with Christa, the mentoring and finding some allies, finding people that you can talk to inside and outside of the sport as well, to help you really put a plan in place. And so for me, it's really around finding out what those gaps were and then putting that plan in place. So whether it was making sure I studied twice as hard, I knew the rules, I knew all the mechanics, I attended camps and clinics, staying fit, all of those things really helped me, together with building that mental strength and maturity to be able to deal with that. I think that's really important. And for younger officials, like what Anna talked about, is giving them that sort of plan very, very early on, recognizing that these are going to be challenges that they're going to face, and not leaving them on their own, to be able to have a good solution and have a network and a support system in place. So I think that's really important. The other thing I'd add is that I would say that part of a coping strategy for being held back is ask for what you want. And I think for women, we don't learn this soon enough. I certainly didn't learn this soon enough to ask for what I want, to ask for or let my goals be known, and let them be known to others that could help and support me. Talk about what those gaps are and what I'm doing to try and to get to the next level or to improve myself. I think for women, it must be in our DNA, but I think we don't ask. Men ask a lot better than us. We tend to hold back. We tend to be more givers than takers. And I think by demonstrating those skills and talking about our experiences and our qualifications is really a good thing. And I would recommend that to younger officials. Keep your resume, take stock of your accomplishments and talk about them. You're not bragging, but you are being able to say, hey, I've done these things and I'm working on my gaps, and this is where I want to get to and what I want to do. And then when you have those challenges, don't let them weigh you down. So resiliency is a big thing as well. Trust yourself and push forward. Christa said this as well, be softer on yourself. I'm my worst critic. I'm sure that everyone on this panel is their own worst critic. Positive talk is something that we don't do enough of, and it is very powerful. And look for those people, like I said earlier, that can be positive for you as well. They're just not saying everything you did is wonderful and you should be moving on to a higher level. They're really helping you by understanding what your challenges are and putting strategies in place to deal with those. And then I have my own 3-second rule. So it's not camping in the key 3-second rule. It's really 3 seconds that I give myself to sulk, to feel sorry for myself, and to wallow and certainly in a game you can't give yourself more than 3 seconds, but even after a game, you need to know you have to let go. And if we continue to replay the movie over and over again, the bad movies, and we continue to sit there and be hard on ourselves without putting a plan on how we're going to get better and move past it, we're sabotaging ourselves. So we have to recognize that can happen to you, and you need that support network, and you need strategies to remind yourself to be able to pull you out of that. So.
Thank you, Marla. I think what you touched on is really important. When we talk about the politics of gender in everything, we, mostly women, represent less than 10%. And as long as we represent only 10%, we will never make strides to initiate that change, because we're always fighting each other, right? We're not, and for a lot of it, what we need to do is initiate that change. I think we're ready for that culture shift, and we're ready kind of for that support. Anna, can you tell us or add and build on what both Christa and Marla said?
Yeah, just talking about the culture shift or the change of attitude that I think we're all hoping that we can see, especially when we go back to basketball after being away for a year. I would say, like, the number one tactic that I have used, and the advice I would give to younger females coming up, especially like refereeing the men's game, where like you are surrounded by men. The coaches are male, the players are male, all of your partners are male. Like, there are very few of us in Canada right now, I think, working full men's like youth sport schedules. I'm really fortunate to be one of them. But like, my number one tactic in dealing with like these perceptions of like, can she actually officiate this game, is like, I've been very specific. Like, I have I decided early on, like, I'm going to pick that one thing that I am really going to be able to excel at, that I'm going to be able to bring to every crew, that is going to impress my male colleagues and, you know, try to earn myself a level of respect, because it takes years to earn respect, particularly officiating in the men's game. So for me, from the start of my career, that has been rules knowledge. Like I've been that rules nerd from the very start, and I've reffed on so many male crews where like I'm ultimately the only one there who knows the ruling in most situations. So like it's like an asset, like it's something of value that I can bring to the crew. And so like for me, that's been like I've chosen one thing that I know I can be really good at, and I've gone with it, and I've, you know, related to that is just persistence. Like I've been so persistent. I know a lot of us have said, you know, you just work hard, you work twice as hard. Like that's, I don't want to have to give that advice, but it's true. And then, I mean, Marla also talked about mentorship, or like, you know, your female network. Like my other tactic throughout has been like, I have a pretty good, even though we're a small crew, especially in Ontario, I know some provinces have like greater percentages of female officials, but we have a small crew in Ontario, but like I lean on them like crazy. If, you know, something terrible happens in a game, we text, we call. Like it's an unofficial kind of pure social network, but like it's incredibly valuable. So that has absolutely been a tactic for me.
Thanks, Anna. It's yeah, we're starting to get to the last part of the conversation, which is great, which is solutioning, like the mentoring. You know, it's so fascinating, that whole like being asked, or women needing to ask, women needing to actually say, this is what I want, this is a goal I have. So, you know, maybe one of the solutions we need to think of is providing safe spaces for women to actually do that, acknowledging that in the work world, women will look at a job fact sheet, they'll look at a job advertisement, and if they don't feel that they have 100% of the qualifications, they're not going to apply. Whereas men, research shows this, research shows that men will apply if they feel like they have 50% of what the job is looking for. So knowing that, educational theory talks about we do our best learning when we're uncomfortable. So if you know that genetically, females aren't going to put themselves out there if they don't feel like they're 100% ready and 100% qualified, they might not be in a state of being or state of mind to say, I want to try the next level. Someone's going to have to push them there. And then in addition to that, we have the system that's kind of working, in some ways working against us, because we're seeing other people getting there quicker. And so it's like, ugh, we should say something and we don't, because we don't think we're ready, but we need somebody to push us there, you know. So open it up and just we need to start talking about how can we get beyond these barriers, like what kinds of things can we do, like, so Anna, you mentioned mentoring. Christa?
I just wanted to give an example that's really current. I'm a part of a group, the first ever Black female coach mentorship program, that the BCCA partnered with Coaches of Ontario. And, you know, that group was beyond more powerful than I could have ever imagined. And, you know, for the mentors and the mentees, right? The feedback from the mentees, a lot of them were right on that. Am I still going to coach? And how do I do that? And what does that look like? And, you know, having that mentor and being able to lean on them and see how they got through it, and then hearing other examples of the other mentor, like it was amazing feedback. So I would say that was huge. And then also from a mentor standpoint, building my network beyond just the basketball coaching experience, and hearing from the swimmers and the tracks and you go through what I go through. And like I'm not on an island by myself, and how do we do better? And so just having that discussion of bringing people along all together. So that just made me think, how do we create more mentorship programs like that? And how do we reach people even younger? Like you said, how do we reach that middle school kid that just loves sport? Like, and imagine we got them. So yes, mentorship, I'm all for.
Thank you, Christa. Because I think one thing that we're all learning from COVID is I don't need to live in the same province as Marla to see her. Like, hello, we have technology that can bring people together from all around the world. My Olympic crew meets once a month. We're going to be the best. Our supervisor says we're going to be the best prepared crew that ever walked here because we've had a year extra to prepare. So yeah, I love that. I mean, it's just, we have all of these tools at our disposal now that we may not have ever thought of before. So Marla, Anna, Georgia, do you have any other solutions you'd like to throw out there?
Frankie, I mean, I just to add to what Christa said, you know, Abby Wambach has this amazing quote, and she said, we can not all be goal scorers, but if we're on her team, we better be running to that goal scorer. And I think that we don't want women just at the elite level. We need women at every level. So this is not just about getting to the Olympics. This is not just about getting to the U Sport level. We need U8 women basketball referees on Saturdays in gyms. We need them as examples, and whatever level that they get to, in order for us to get to that culture shift, we need them at every level to be present. And once they're present, then they're visible, then we can start making the change, because right now, a lot of the women are filtered towards the top of the pyramid. And because of that, the pyramid is still skewed. So we need that balance in order to have it throughout, just as we need coaches at the lowest level and at the highest level.
I think Nadine said it best when she a couple of nights ago, when she said that she's still, when she was traveling, gallivanting around the world, she still tried to do a couple of Saturday morning games with the kids. I'm trying to build that into the softball program. When you get there, you have to still give back, because it's important for those younger age groups to see. And somebody else said, maybe Penny, see it, be it. Like, if you see it, you can think that you can be it, right? So you're absolutely right. We have to saturate all levels with women. And, you know, another thing that we're maybe not so great at, local, provincial, national, and there's a great question in the chat about, we need women in all roles. We need women to be assigners. We need women to be evaluators, instructors. Like, I personally don't know if I've, like, think about this for a second. Is there a female assigner at the university level in the country?
Penny.
Okay, one.
Oh,
Is-
okay.
That's a start. That's a start. Way to go, Penny.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she is. Yeah.
Okay, so we have one. You know, but if we're actually thinking about diversifying, like, and to Christa's point earlier, how do you even think about diversifying outside of gender when you haven't even done a great job of gender? Like, how do you do like equity, diversity, and inclusion really, really super well when we're not even getting this one a-okay? So, but like, I mean, having evaluators at every championship, having at least one female evaluator at every championship. And I think Canada Basketball has done a great job of trying to do that nationally, but think about all of the provincial championships that run. And like in Alberta, I spent most of my career there. There's 4 levels of provincial women's, and I think they try, but do they, like, does every province try to do that? That could be a step in the right direction. And do we have females teaching in every clinic? I don't know, I'm throwing that out there. Do we have females teaching? I don't know.
We have about 10, 15 minutes left. Unless there's anybody that has to add to that, we'd like to get to some questions, and we would encourage everybody that is on the panel tonight to ask as many questions as you can. The first question comes to us and it says, has there been a time when you've almost quit officiating, or, and I'll add for Christa, coaching?
I'm just going to throw this out there because Anna alluded to it earlier. The only time I ever thought of maybe packing the runners in, never considered it on the softball side. The only time was when my age worked against me. My age created a barrier for me, and that was the only time I ever thought of doing that, but I loved it too much. So anyone else?
I'll throw one out there. This was really early on when I started refereeing in the college level. I was in a tournament. I won't name which one, but the athletic director was quite powerful, I guess you would say, in the sport. And my crew, we had a pretty good game, but he didn't particularly like a few of my calls. and went to the, at that time, the evaluator, observer, assigner, referee, coach today, and basically said, you know, she's not working my game, because I had been assigned a bronze medal game in that tournament, and their team was playing in that. And so that went on for, you know, quite a few hours throughout the tournament, and into the next morning, back and forth. And it was very emotionally draining, very, very upsetting. And you know, I worked that game and had a good game, and overall had a really good tournament, but I did not feel supported at all. I felt supported by the crew that I worked with, and but I didn't feel supported by the institution and by the observing crew, and it was really, really hard to get past that, and took me a long time to decide if I was going to come back after that. And maybe I'll say that, and the way I did come back from that was others that were observing at that tournament, not part of that observing crew, and others that were involved in sport and were watching, you know, just being able to talk about the situation, just being able to go over, you know, what happened, and talk about how to move past that. And so that's really where the mentoring and the network and the support system, you need to have it in all places to be able to support you.
We have a question in the chat. What are some tangible ways you would suggest how officials can practice and develop resilience? What an awesome question, especially after a difficult game. So first of all, I just hosted a webinar last night from a sports psychologist who talked about her research is actually the tie between mental toughness and resilience. You can't really separate them. So one thing I would suggest is just people who have had significant obstacles in their life, whether they've overcome trauma, socioeconomic, like not really having a lot and coming out of that, those kinds of things lead to mental toughness, which lead to resiliency. So I would say, just to you as human beings, if you've been through those kinds of things, you're going to have a skill set there that people that haven't had challenges in their life may not have. So it is something you can develop, but we need to recognize that some people may have strengths there because of things that they've gone through. So saying that, if you haven't, and you're coming into officiating and you've had one of these like really great lives with no trauma and no obstacles, then this is what Marla was referring to. Officiating is going to help you professionally and personally, and same vice versa, because the things that you will go through are going to actually build your resiliency skill set. And I would, like, you need to rely on your mentors and your support network. It is possible. And really, sometimes officiating is one of the few things that you actually need to make mistakes to learn. And that's how we build resilience. I don't know, Christa, Anna, Marla, Georgia, if you want to add anything to that. I just love that question.
I might just throw one little thing on to that. Frankie, you and I must have been in the same webinar. But what I'll say to that is kind of like even my my example that I gave is, you know, we all know about PTSD, and people talk about post-traumatic growth. And so you move outside of the depression, you move into growth. And so you come away with a purpose and a plan. And so that's one of the ways to help you build resiliency. And the other piece I would say, when I mentioned earlier about crisis stimulation, and that is an area for you to be, like you were saying, Frankie, to be in those situations, so that you can be able to know what to do the next time. You have to experience it, and you have to go through that, but you have to know you're going through something like that, so you can come out the other end with a growth plan, or with, you know, with new knowledge, with new skills to be able to deal with things in the future. So I think that's really important. And I go back to the self-compassion too, you know, so that we can be kind to ourselves a little bit more instead of so hard and so critical, because when we are hard and critical, I know myself, that's when we want to quit.
And I mean, I think we have to be a little bit patient too and not be too hard on ourselves. I mean, sometimes we see these young women that start in officiating and we're so excited because we still don't have that many, that maybe we are like, oh, I can't wait for you to do your first game at this or what, you know, and just be patient. Enjoy the process. Focus on the process and not the outcome. Right? That would be something I would really like to share. I mean, in softball, it's really like a long journey to get to the high end. In basketball, it can progress very quickly. So I just would enjoy the process.
Frankie, what I would add to that too is that, you know, in coaching, we talk about failing forward. It's okay to make a mistake. And I think that a lot of times refereeing is such an exact art that sometimes we put ourselves pigeonholed in this box that we have to be perfect. And the game that we're in is not perfect. The environment is not perfect. So I think that learning from that perspective is really important. The other thing that we need to realize is women grow through through social and companionship. Men grow through competition. So a support network is, I really like what Penny wrote in, you know, in the chat room saying, you know, you need a support network. You need a 911 buddy that you say, hey, I just, you know, the world fell down, help, and have a sense of humor. I laugh at myself all the time. And I think that from a resilience perspective, it's okay to fail forward. And from that, you kind of learn the process.
Sorry, go ahead, Christa.
Really short, just wanted to add to that, saying what Georgia said. I tell my athletes all the time, basketball is a game of mistakes. And so if I have to allow them to make mistakes and understand that, like, the best shooters don't shoot 50%, right? So I have to understand that all of us, everybody involved in basketball, whether you're at the table, whether you're coaching, whether you're fishing, we're all making mistakes. It's a game of mistakes. And we always say, next play, right? But it starts with us before we can actually expect it from everybody else.
You know, Christa, there's this project that was started on International Women's Day, and it's called Said Before. And there's a quote in there that says, you know, until we all have made it, none of us have made it. You know, Rosemary Brown said that in 1973. So I think you're absolutely right. We've got to be a little bit more forgiving. And I think we need to be a little bit more accepting and have that piece of saying, hey, you know, we're all keepers of the game, the coaches, parents, referees, players, and we want to build the game. And in order for us to build that game, we've got to be welcoming of that fail forward mentality.
Did we address all the questions? I think so.
We did.
Okay. Did you want to start the concluding comments, Georgia?
Absolutely. Ladies, what a wonderful night. Thank you for putting yourselves on stage with us. I think that, you know, women at all levels have been calling for equality forever. So I thank you for sharing your stories with me. More importantly, I'd like to thank, and Frankie would like to thank the behind the scenes people, you know, Danielle Emmons, Rike Olasina, and Mike Thompson for putting this wonderful thing together. They are the people that are not present, you know, on screen, but are working diligently off. And I want to thank my co-host, Frankie. Frankie and I did my first U Sport championship together. And I think her words to me exactly was, calm down, Georgia. You'll be fine. So I said those words to myself tonight as I started this panel. So Frankie, thank you for continuing to be an inspiration to me. You're an incredible partner and a mother, and I thank you for your friendship and for sharing the screen with me tonight. And for the three ladies on the screen, thank you for continuing to be a power in basketball. We need you, and we want you, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Georgia, for being my co-host. I echo all of your kind comments. I think the world of you. Thank you to Canada Basketball for giving us the opportunity to do this. To the three of you for being, honestly, Anna, Christa, Marla, for being so authentic and genuine in your sentiments and the thoughts that you shared. To all of the attendees, thank you for coming. And I just want to thank all of the people who have presented throughout the month And I hope that those of you who have been attending have seen common threads, whether you're a player or a coach or an official or an assigner, instructor, whatever role that you play. In the very first week, Bev talked about relationships. That's been a common theme throughout this entire month. In the coaches week, I heard a lot of comments about being positive from Lisa. That work flow balance, because it really doesn't matter what role you have. If you want to be excellent at your craft, you have to have good balance. And just being great at what role we choose means that we make choices. And I think we've all chosen to embrace whatever role it is that we want to do. And I'm so grateful that I had the chance to share this hour and a half with you all. I've learned from you as usual. And yeah, I'm very humbled to have shared this time with you. So thank you so much. Very grateful.